Hello, it's Elizabeth Busby here, and welcome to Discerning Marriage. Today, we are going to be talking about 3 signs that he or she isn't the one. Before we get into it, please like and subscribe and click that notification bell so that you can be aware of any more videos that we put out. Number 1, if they push your physical boundaries.
Not touching me!
Not touching.
I talk about this in my free ebook that I wrote for you guys, 10 questions to ask at the beginning of your relationship. It's in the show notes. Get that if you haven't. But one of the things I talk about in that book is in the beginning of your relationship, talk about your physical boundaries.
Boundaries. This is no end. Boundaries.
Over a meal, right? This is a casual conversation that you ought to be having in a setting that's not stressful, that's not totally intimate, nothing like that. It doesn't have to be like, I'm having a conversation with you. But it does need to be something that you speak about. You don't need to be stressing about it. Just tell them. But, they might say in that moment, at that restaurant, that they're totally fine with that. But when you get into physical moments, you're watching a movie, you're cuddling on the couch, you're alone somewhere, you get into the heat of the moment. If they don't respect your boundaries, that is a huge, huge, huge no-no. Huge. I would really encourage you to consider that you in the relationship. Maybe they've never been in a relationship where they've had these kinds of chastity boundaries. Maybe they've never even thought about it for themselves, but for love of you, they're committing to this gift of themselves. They're trying, to live this chaste life, but you give them maybe one try. And if they push it and you draw the boundary, like, okay, but if it happens again, 2 is a pattern to me. If it happens again, I would really consider ending the relationship. You do not want someone who does not respect you. There's nowhere good that can lead. That's tricky. That's really hard. But I really encourage you to uphold your own dignity if they're not willing to do it for you, and let that boundary pushing be a sign that they might not be a good fit for you. Number 2, if they do not respect your faith. Now, I know that a lot of my audience is Catholic, and I know a lot of my audience is Protestant, and there's a little bit of a different take for those two. So if you're my Protestant audience, what I would say in this space is make sure that they are also a baptized Christian, that they support your faith, that they're not going to pull you away, that they're not going to be like, we need to have our son's soccer game on Sunday, so bummer, we can't go to church this week. Now, for my Catholic audience, I think that the vast, vast, vast majority of you are going to be called to marry baptized Christians as a baseline. The church's design for marriage actually follows this too. If you marry a baptized Christian, you are able to enter into a sacramental marriage. If you want to marry someone who's not baptized, there is a whole process that you have to go through, because the church recognizes that you could be in serious spiritual danger if the person that you're married to is not baptized. Now, I would challenge that even further and say a lot of you in that category are going to marry Catholics. And here's why.
Scooby-Doo, take note.
The Catholic Church has so much rich, good beauty for your soul. The sacrament of the Eucharist, the closest intimacy that God has given us to be with Him. The sacrament of reconciliation, where you can be brought back into a state of grace. These are such precious gifts for us. And if you are married to someone who does not understand that goodness and beauty in that, it can be very easy for you to be pulled away from the sacraments. Not only are the sacraments beautiful, but the Catholic Church is one of the only institutions that really stands by a lot of good for you sexual morality. God designed our bodies. God designed our sexuality. God designed this marital intimacy between man and woman. And so God, of course, is the one who knows how it's going to work best. So He has entrusted the church with safeguarding His design for our humanity. And a lot of that falls under sexual morality. So when you're not coming from a Catholic background, when you don't respect that authority of the body that God entrusted all of this to, it can be very easy to be like, well, really just don't want any more babies. I have 3 kids under 3. My health is really stressed. I really don't want more babies. So what we're going to do is we're just going to contracept. But that's not God's design for your body. That's not God's design for your sexuality. And if you are tempted to it, but you don't have the authority of the church to help you stay in that space, it can be very easy to just not obey that, but then also eventually to leave the church. Also, the church asks you to raise your babies Catholic. That's one of the things that you say in the wedding vows that happen at the Catholic Mass. So if you're married to someone who's not Catholic, and especially someone who passionately doesn't believe what the Catholic Church believes, that could be a huge point of contention later on in your relationship. So a lot of you, I think, are going to be called to marry Catholics. For those of you who aren't called to marry Catholics, maybe you're already in love with a Protestant, maybe you're dating a Protestant, you really feel like God's calling you to marry this Protestant. Absolutely, God could be doing that, right? I am not in your discernment. It is totally possible. There have been lots of saints made in the church who did not marry someone who was Catholic. However, all of the things I just mentioned apply to you. And it could be very, I'm not going to say spiritually dangerous. I'm not going to go that far, but I am going to say that there could be a lot of spiritual temptations if you're not on the same page and you aren't firmly convicted about God's design for your body, God's design for your soul in the Catholic Church, and if the other person isn't open to dialoguing with you. At a bare minimum, if you're going to marry someone who's not in our Catholic faith, I would say have these conversations about sexual morality, natural family planning versus contraception. This is a doozy, but not using artificial reproductive technologies if God allows the cross of infertility for you, not being open to divorce and remarriage. Some of these very firm tenets of the Catholic faith, your Protestant beloved must be on the same page with you. Number 3, this sounds silly, but it's serious, so stick with me. If they are rude to serving staff at restaurants,
That's rude.
I would strongly consider not letting them be still a candidate for your future spouse. And here's why. I was a server in college. It's good, honest work, but there is a sense in which there is a power dynamic when someone is a server. When you go to a restaurant, you are the one with the power, and the server is literally there to serve you. You have effectively hired them to help you with that meal. If the person that you're dating is rude to those people, that effectively communicates how they view power dynamics, right? If they feel like they have a lot of power in a situation and they are rude to people who are not in that same level of power, that is something to note.
I'm taking notes.
That falls into respect of other people. That falls into how they're going to view people like your children who don't have the same, level of power that you have. And there's a beautiful holy dynamic to the parent-child relationship, but it is a power dynamic in a certain sense. And you want them to uphold the dignity of those people who don't have the same level of power. It's just rude in general. You probably don't want to be marrying someone who's objectively rude. The way that they treat serving staff at restaurants is a huge indicator of how they look at the dignity of the person, especially the person more vulnerable, in a position of more vulnerability than them. So those are my 3. The first one is if they push your physical boundaries in the moment, right? In the moment of intimacy, if they push you too far, I would consider ending it. If they do not support your faith, again, they don't have to necessarily be of the same faith, but if they don't respect it, if they try to actively pull you away from it, that's number 2. And number 3, if they're rude to the serving staff at restaurants. Those are the 3 signs that I would say this person is not a good fit for you to be your spouse. So I hope that this was helpful for you. I hope that you enjoyed this. Leave a comment if you want. We love hearing from you. And until next time, stay close to the heart of Jesus and be not afraid. Bye.